Story.
Tuesday night, a subdued Donald Trump claimed a victory in Indiana's Republican presidential primary.
It really looks like a massive victory and looks like we win all 57 delegates.
And with Trump now only about 200 delegates away from what he needs to secure the nomination, even GOP Chairman Reince Priebus tweeted Trump's the party's presumptive nominee. He said, quote, "We need to unite and focus on defeating Hillary Clinton." Ted Cruz needed a win in Indiana, his last stand to stop Trump. A disappointed Cruz announced he's suspending his campaign.
We gave it everything we've got, but the voters chose another path.
And now it's clear that path is a Washington outsider, with Republicans preferring a non-politician, a brash, outspoken billionaire businessman over the Tea Party candidate. In New York, Trump told his supporters America needs to win again because it's been losing all the time.
We lose with our military. We can't beat ISIS. We lose with trade. We lose with borders. We lose with everything. We're not going to lose. We're going to start winning again, and we're going to win big league. Believe me.
But the question now, can Trump win his race for the White House against Hillary Clinton? Secretary Clinton now has 92% of the delegates she needs to secure her party's nomination. But Democrat Socialist Senator Bernie Sanders, who upset Clinton to win the Indiana primary, said not so fast. And he said he has momentum.
I understand that Secretary Clinton thinks that this campaign is over. I've got some bad news for her.
But with many superdelegates already pledged to Mrs. Clinton, it seems mathematically impossible for Sanders to win his party's nomination. But he promises to stay in the race. And although their party conventions and official nominations are still more than 2 months away, Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton will now focus their campaign efforts against one another. Gary Lane, CBN News.
Thanks, Gary. Our CBN News political correspondent, David Brody, is with us. And David, you were with the Trumps. You've been on the campaign trail. Now he's turning his fire on Hillary. Tell me what it's going to be like.
It's going to be pretty intense, Pat. Boy, where do I even begin with Donald Trump? He has done the unthinkable. Literally, the GOP establishment needs smelling salts this morning to get themselves off the floor because we're in for a wild ride. Look, everybody thinks that Donald Trump will fight nasty with Hillary Clinton in a general election. And guess what, Pat? That's exactly right. I'm waiting for the news conference, and you know it's coming, Pat, where Paula Jones and Juanita Broderick and all of the women from Bill Clinton's past are standing around Donald Trump when Hillary Clinton tries to play the war on women card against Trump. Trump's going to say, Hillary, I've got a few folks I'd like you to meet. And I think that's what we're in for, Pat, coming this fall.
Look, you were out talking to voters. I do hope that you were talking to voters. What did they say? These Trump voters are so passionate for their candidate.
They're passionate because he breaks through that political correctness that's out there. They can't stand it. And oh, by the way, newsflash to America, evangelicals are part of that frustrated class of voter out there. You know, I call them the sick and tired evangelical voters, Pat, who have, let's be honest here for a moment, propelled Donald Trump to victory. I know it's the secret or the dirty little secret no one wants to talk about, but these are not just the nominal Christians, the culturally conservative Christians in quotes that Donald Trump is attracting. He is attracting, look at Indiana on Tuesday night. He attracted 35% of the weekly church-going crowd. So these are not just folks that are showing up for Easter and Christmas in church. These are actually weekly evangelicals who are sick and tired of politics as usual. And quite frankly, Pat, this is an indictment of the Republican Party. The fact that Donald Trump could be the nominee of the Republican Party really says a lot about the Republican Party, how they have decided for years and years, decades, if you will, to say, forget about it. We're not really going to listen to the voters. We're going to do our thing and basically drink the Potomac water. And indeed, evangelicals and others have said, you know what, we'll even go with Trump after all of this.
You know, we had John Boehner as Speaker, and we had Mitch McConnell as the Majority Leader in the Senate, and the Republicans had taken control of the House and the Senate. and yet they didn't seem to be able to stand up to Obama. Was that on the hearts of voters when they went to the polls?
No, there's no doubt about it. It definitely was. It was enough of Mitch McConnell, enough of John Boehner. And, quite frankly, John Boehner probably did Ted Cruz a favor to a degree the other day when he called Cruz Lucifer in the flesh because, Ted Cruz could look at that and say, hey, that's a ringing endorsement because the establishment can't stand me. And so, Ted Cruz actually had the anti-establishment folks that were voting for him. The voters liked that. I think Ted Cruz's problem was the messenger. In other words, what he was in terms of how he was not able to relate to voters as well as Donald Trump. In other words, folks might have liked the message that Ted Cruz was saying because he is a rock-ribbed conservative. I'm not quite convinced, though, that they actually liked the messenger. And I think it all fell apart for Ted Cruz in Iowa. If you remember, he won Iowa. Evangelicals went, as Donald Trump would say, big league for Ted Cruz. And then the bottom fell out with evangelicals because 2 weeks later, it was Donald Trump doing well with evangelicals, not Ted Cruz, because what happened in Iowa? That was when Ted Cruz's campaign basically started the whole Ben Carson situation, saying that it looked like he was going to drop out or not campaign anymore. And then the Iowa flyer was controversial, the mailer that folks got. And then Marco Rubio, Ben Carson, and yes, Donald Trump all started to pile on Ted Cruz. And that's when Lion Ted became a moniker that he's going to have to live with for a very long time. It was a narrative that went south on Ted Cruz. And quite frankly, if we're truthful, Ted Cruz did play a part in that because his campaign was not able to recontrol or get control again of that narrative.
Well, the dirty tricks were there. I mean, in terms of Carson, was he knowledgeable or aware of what his staff was doing?
There's no evidence that he was actually directly knowledgeable of what was going on. The sense is, though, that, and there's actually some reporting this morning that Jeff Rowe, his campaign manager, and a couple other senior advisors saw the CNN report and then went ahead and started to spread the message out to say it looks like Ben Carson indeed is not going to be campaigning after Iowa. Well, that wasn't completely true. It was partly true. He was going back to Florida, but it kind of took on a life of its own. But no, in terms of Ted Cruz knowing, there's no indication that he knew at all. Part of the problem, Pat, in politics, it's all about that narrative we talk about. Donald Trump had the narrative, the positive narrative going in. In other words, right at the beginning, when he glided down that escalator, that gold-plated escalator at Trump Tower, he was the $10 billion success guy, the art of the deal, the guy that could turn it around and do big things. And he was, he had all this rich success behind or under his belt. Ted Cruz had no narrative to speak of, and that's the problem. Donald Trump's narrative was already solid, and Ted Cruz's narrative, not so much. Look at Marco Rubio, little Marco. All of a sudden, his narrative got defined. Ben Carson's narrative got defined in a negative way as well by some of his missteps, and I think that was a big part of what's happening here.
One last question. Hillary Clinton has got a lot of trouble, a lot of baggage. Does anybody seriously believe that the Obama administration is going to let the Justice Department go for an indictment?
No, not at all. Loretta Lynch is that attorney general, and absolutely not. There's no indication at all that indeed Hillary Clinton will be prosecuted for any some sort of indictment that may potentially come along. No, I don't think there's any sense at all that that's going to happen. And so Hillary Clinton will go into the general election, and everybody's like, well, wait a minute, Bernie Sanders is winning all of these primaries. Well, the reality is the system is a bit rigged, and it has to do with superdelegates. These superdelegates were put in place during the George McGovern days, when George McGovern was as liberal, and the Democrats wanted no part of any sort of liberal Democrats. So they were going to make sure that the Democrat establishment had these superdelegates, the ones that could vote for whoever they wanted, so they can, in essence, play kingmaker and put someone that they wanted in there. And indeed, Hillary Clinton has plenty of those superdelegates, so there's no chance that Bernie Sanders is going to get this, despite the fact that he keeps winning and winning and winning. And, by the way, let me just say on Donald Trump, because I just thought of one thing here. He actually has just won the GOP version of Celebrity Apprentice. I mean, he has beaten the other 16 contestants. He's the winner. Now can he beat Hillary?
And the others, you're fired. I got you. David, thank you so much. Stay with us, and it's an ongoing saga. It's not over yet. But thanks to David Brody for covering that. Very, very insightful.